Welcome back to another video. In celebration of Earth Day and sending a little extra love to Mother Earth, I thought today would be the perfect day to explore the question, how does the way that we eat impact the Earth? If you're here, you've probably heard that what we put on our plates can have an impact on the Earth and the environment. In the United States, food is responsible for 26% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. This is a really large and complex topic. I definitely won't be able to fully do it justice in just one video. I do hope that I can explore it in greater depth in later videos, but today I want to talk about the results from a 2023 study that I found that compared 6 different diet types and their impact on the environment. Let's get started. Let's take the next few minutes to talk about what diet types tend to be gentler on the Earth, how they are gentler on the Earth, and whether or not you can actually make a difference just in what you choose to put on your plate. First, what diets are gentler on the Earth? This study compared the standard American or Western diet, keto, paleo, what they called climatarian, Mediterranean, and vegan diets. Most of us are going to be familiar with the standard American or Western diet. This diet is heavy in processed foods, such as processed meats and other animal products. It's also going to be limited in fruit and vegetable intake. The keto diet emphasizes a restricted intake of carbohydrates, meaning that people often lean more in the protein and fat consumption, and they very often have a heavier meat consumption as well. If you've ever heard of the carnivore diet, that is a diet where people exclusively eat meat, and this diet type is kind of an extreme version of the keto diet. The paleo diet emphasizes eating foods that have been minimally processed, or essentially eating the way cavemen might have eaten. This diet doesn't necessarily exclude any particular type of food, except for foods that have been heavily processed. The climatarian diet would be one in which people are intentionally reducing their environmental impact through their food choices. This might mean eating more locally grown or in-season foods, or reducing their meat consumption. Next would be the Mediterranean diet. This diet is a diet type that is common in the region surrounding the Mediterranean, and it emphasizes eating plant foods, healthy fats such as those that come from olives or olive oil, and also smaller amounts of animal products. It doesn't necessarily exclude any food types, but it definitely emphasizes healthier food types within all of the foods that it includes. And then finally, the vegan diet is a diet that is completely devoid of animal products. So the study found that the diets that had the lowest environmental impacts were vegan, climatarian, and Mediterranean diets. They concluded that this was likely because these diets had a reduced reliance on meat coming from ruminant animals like cattle or sheep, and they also had a reduced processed food consumption. So let's get into the environmental impact. How are these diets gentler on the Earth, and how did they measure environmental impact in this study? The study looked at carbon footprint as one of the primary measures of environmental impact in this study. They defined carbon footprint as the amount of greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide that's emitted during a given period. When comparing the total carbon footprint of these diets, they found that the highest footprint belonged to those that were eating a keto diet that focuses heavily on red meats and dairy, and that the lowest impact came from the vegan diet, assuming a vegan diet that was primarily consuming whole plant-based foods. The researchers in this study did assume that vegans were eating an increased intake of fresh fruits and vegetables, which allows for a reduced carbon footprint compared to the other diet groups. They also assumed that the vegan diet would be lower in processed foods, which also reduces a vegan's footprint. While in this study, the vegan's footprint was the smallest, it doesn't necessarily have to be. With a rise in the consumption of processed foods and with the rise in the availability of processed vegan foods, Vegans are much more regularly consuming processed foods and therefore having an environmental impact that is trending more in the direction of the standard American diet. If that diet was following a more whole foods, plant-based style of eating, it definitely had the lowest impact among all of the diet groups. This brings us to our question of, can you make a difference with just what you put on your plate? According to this study, the answer does appear to be yes, not just to the planet, but also to your own health. Beyond the environmental impact of these diet types, the study also explored the individual health impact of each of these diets. They pointed out that among all of these diet types, those that emphasize whole foods or foods that are minimally processed show a reduced risk of disease, while emphasizing that heavy red meat, dairy, and processed food intake had the opposite effect of being associated with higher risk of disease. Reading this study, it seems to conclude that an emphasis in increased consumption of whole foods like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, and a reduced consumption of red meat and dairy not only reduced one's environmental impact, but they were also linked to improved health outcomes for those that were eating those diets. If you're interested in reading this study for yourself, check out the description for the video below to find the link to this paper. Thanks for watching. Happy Earth Day. Go eat some vegetables and maybe hug a tree. See you in the next one. Bye guys.